6 months had passed at their tribunal at Harmony Point. The galaxy had changed in ways nobody expected. The truth about the Velthari hegemony spread like fire through dry grass. Species that had served the hegemony for centuries began to revolt. Worlds that had paid tribute refused to continue. The empire that had ruled through fear and lies was crumbling, but Underlord Desix refused to accept defeat. He gathered the loyal remnants of the Velthari military. He built a fleet from the ashes of his falling empire, and he planned one final strike that would punish those who had destroyed everything he valued. His target was Earth. Lucy Warren learned about the threat on a quiet morning. She was living on the Draconari temporary settlement now, a chain of asteroids that the dragons had claimed as their new home while they searched for a proper world. She had been officially appointed as ambassador to the Draconari by Earth Command. It was a title that still felt strange to her. She was just a geologist who had said hello to a dragon. The message came from Admiral Grant. Her voice was tense. She reported that Velthari ships had been detected moving toward Earth. The fleet was not large, maybe 50 vessels, but they were heavily armed. Desix was leading them personally. His final transmission to the galaxy had promised to burn humanity's homeworld. As payment for their interference, Lucy felt cold fear grip her heart. Earth, her home, her family, everyone she had known before. Kethru 7. They were all in danger because of what she had done. She went to find Morthax. Immediately, the Sovereign was resting in her cavern, surrounded by younger dragons who were learning the old songs and stories. When Lucy entered, Morthax raised her silver head. She saw the fear in Lucy's eyes and knew something was wrong. Lucy told her everything. She described the fleet, the threat, the timing. She said she needed to return to Earth. She needed to be there, even if she could do nothing. She could not hide in safety while her people faced destruction. Morthax listened in silence. When Lucy finished, the Sovereign rose to her full height. She called out in a voice that echoed through every cavern in the asteroid chain. She summoned the council. The 35 dragons gathered quickly. Vetvarian came first, his golden eyes burning with purpose. Eurixith came close behind, no longer the frightened young dragon she had been. The others followed, filling the great central cavern with wings and scales and ancient power. Morthax addressed them all. She told them what Lucy had shared. She told them that the humans who had freed them, who had stood beside them, who had demanded justice for them, were now in danger. She asked what the Draconari would do. Vectharian spoke first. He said the answer was obvious. The humans had protected them when they were weak and confused. Now the Draconari would protect the humans. This was not debt. This was honor. This was what they had always been. The other dragons roared in agreement. The sound shook the asteroids. It echoed into space. Mort H.A. turned to Lucy. She said the Draconari proposed something that had not been done in 12,000 years. Not since the founding of their civilization. She said they wished to bond with humanity, to become partners, protectors. Family. Lucy asked what bonding meant. Vectharian explained. It was a joining of purpose. Where humans went, dragons would follow. Where dragons nested, humans would be welcome. Their fates would be linked across generations. Their children and their children's children would stand together against whatever darkness the universe held. Lucy felt tears streaming down her face. She said she could not speak for all of humanity. She was just one person. Morthax smiled, a strange expression on a dragon's face. She said that was exactly why she could speak for them. Leaders and politicians thought of power and advantage. Lucy thought of people. That was why the dragons trusted her. The Draconari fleet launched within the hour. All 35 dragons flew through space toward Earth, their wings somehow finding purchase even in the void. The human ships that had been stationed at the settlement joined them. Admiral Grant's fleet was already racing home from the outer colonies. They arrived just as Thesix's forces reached Earth's orbit. The Velthary fleet was arranged in attack formation. Thesix's flagship hung at the center, bristling with weapons. His final message played across all channels. He said humanity had doomed itself by befriending monsters. He said their world would burn. He said history would remember this day as the death of human arrogance. Admiral Grant's response was simple. She said the only thing dying today was tyranny. The battle began. Human ships and dragons fought as one. The training they had done over the past months showed in every maneuver. Captain Derek Shaw led his squadron alongside Eurixith, the two of them cutting through enemy fighters with practiced precision. Bactharian and Morthax targeted the largest ships, their plasma breath melting armor designed to withstand nuclear weapons. Thesix fought desperately. His fleet was smaller, but his ships were powerful. He knew he was going to die. He had accepted that, but he was determined to take as many enemies with him as possible. His flagship broke through the defensive line. It headed straight for Earth's surface, weapons charging for a devastating strike. If he could hit a major city, he could kill millions before anyone stopped him. Lucy watched from the observation deck of a human cruiser. She saw the flagship descending. She saw the weapons glowing. She saw death approaching her homeworld. Then Eurixith appeared. The young dragon had broken away from the main battle. She flew faster than any dragon had flown before, pushing her body beyond its limits. She caught up with the flagship just as it entered the atmosphere. She wrapped her wings around its hull. She breathed fire directly into its engines. The explosion was visible from space. A ball of flame that consumed both the ship and the dragon holding it. Lucy screamed. She pounded on the window. She begged for Eurixith to somehow survive. The fire faded. The flagship was gone. Fragments fell into the ocean, far from any city. And in the middle of the debris, a shape moved. Eurixith was alive. Barely. Her scales were blackened. Her wings were torn. But she was flying slowly, painfully, toward the surface. She crashed into a field outside a small town and lay still. The remaining Velthary ships tried to flee. The dragons caught them. There was no mercy this time. Thesix died cursing humanity and dragons alike. His empire died with him. Lucy's shuttle landed beside Eurixith minutes later. She ran to the dragon's side and knelt in the scorched grass. Eurixith opened one eye. The brilliant blue was dimmed with pain. She asked if she had done well. Lucy held the dragon's massive head in her lap. She said Eurixith had done more than well. She had saved millions of lives. She had been brave beyond words. She had honored everything the Draconari stood for. Eurixith tried to smile. She said she had learned from the best. She said Lucy had taught her that courage was not the absence of fear. It was standing with those you loved despite the fear. Medical teams arrived. Dragon and human healers worked together. Eurixith would live. The scars would remain forever, but she would fly again. The next morning, Morthax addressed the people of Earth. Her voice was broadcast to every screen, every speaker, every device on the planet. She spoke of ancient bonds and new beginnings. She spoke of darkness and light. She spoke of two species who had found each other across 10,000 years and chosen to stand together. She said the Draconari had searched the galaxy for worthy partners. They had found cruelty and cowardice in most places. But in humanity, they had found something rare. A species that treated strangers with dignity. A species that fought for justice, even when the odds were impossible. A species that reached out with kindness before reaching out with weapons. She declared the founding of the Human Draconari Alliance. Two peoples. One purpose. Protection of the innocent. Justice for the wronged. Hope for the hopeless. Lucy stood beside Rixith on a hill overlooking the celebration. The young dragon was wrapped in healing bandages, but her eyes were bright again. Rixith asked what happened next. Lucy smiled and looked up at the sky where dragons circled in formation, their scales catching the sunlight. She said now they wrote a new chapter, one where nobody had to sleep for 10,000 years, waiting for someone brave enough to say hello. One where humans and dragons built a future together. One where courage and kindness were not weaknesses, but strengths. Rixith spread her healing wings and caught the wind. She rose slowly into the air, joining her brothers and sisters above. Lucy watched her go. Somewhere in the crowd, she could hear children laughing and pointing at the dragons. They were not afraid. They were delighted. To them, dragons were not monsters from old stories. Dragons were friends, protectors, family. That was humanity's gift. That was what made them special. They saw beings instead of beasts. They offered trust before demanding proof. They believed in the goodness of strangers. And sometimes, when you believe in others strongly enough, they become what you believe them to be. The age of fear was over. The age of alliance had begun. 2 months had passed since the Battle of Kethro 7. The galaxy was still talking about what had happened. Videos of dragons breathing plasma fire alongside human fighters played on every news channel. Stories of the ancient Draconari and their imprisonment spread from world to world. And everywhere, people were asking the same question. What came next? The answer came from the Galactic Council. They summoned all parties to Harmony Point, a diplomatic station in neutral space. There would be a tribunal. The Draconari would present their case. The Velthari would present theirs. A High Arbiter would decide the truth. Lucy Warren did not expect to be part of this. She was just a geologist. She had no training in diplomacy or law. But the Draconari insisted. Morthax said that Lucy understood them better than anyone. Vectharian said her words had weight because she spoke from the heart. The dragons wanted her to speak for them. Admiral Patricia Grant supported the choice. She said professional diplomats would try to find compromise. Lucy would demand justice. Sometimes justice was what you needed. So Lucy found herself standing in a great chamber at the heart of Harmony Point. The room was circular and vast. Representatives from 100 species filled the observation galleries. In the center stood 2 platforms. One for the accusers, one for the accused. The Velthari platform held Underlord Thesix, the new military commander who had taken power after Crixtel's death. His gray skin was darker than the ambassadors had been. His many eyes burned with hatred as he looked at the dragons. Beside him stood lawyers and advisors, all clutching documents and holographic evidence. The Draconari platform held Lucy, Vectharian, and Morthax. Dr. Hannah Price, a linguist from Earth, sat nearby to help with translation. That was all. No lawyers, no advisors, just a human geologist and 2 ancient dragons. High Arbiter Zen floated above them all. He was a being of pure energy, chosen for his neutrality. He had no physical form that could be threatened. He had no homeworld that could be attacked. He served only truth. The Arbiter called the tribunal to order. He invited the Velthari to present their case first. Thesix stepped forward. His voice was smooth and practiced. He spoke of the ancient war. He showed holographic images of burning cities and destroyed fleets. He described the Draconari as monsters who ravaged peaceful worlds. He called them war criminals who had been justly imprisoned. He demanded they be returned to custody and executed for their crimes. The gallery murmured. Some species nodded in agreement. The evidence looked damning. The images were horrible. Then it was Lucy's turn. She stood slowly. Her legs were shaking. Her heart was pounding. She was not a speaker. She was not a diplomat. but she had promised the dragons she would try. She asked the Arbiter for permission to let Vectharian respond to the evidence. The Arbiter agreed. Vectharian stepped forward. His golden eyes swept across the gallery. When he spoke, his voice was calm and sad. He said the images were real. The burning cities were real. The destroyed fleets were real. But Thesix had not shown what those cities contained. He had not shown what those fleets carried. The dragon raised his claw and activated a holographic projector of his own. New images filled the air. Images of cages filled with children of a dozen species. Images of auction blocks where living beings were sold. Images of slave markets that stretched across continents. Those cities were not peaceful homes, Vectharian said. They were prisons. Those fleets were not trading vessels. They were slave ships. The Draconari did not attack innocents. They freed them. The gallery erupted in noise. Species shouted in anger and disbelief. Thesix demanded the images be dismissed as fabrications. Lucy stepped forward again. She pulled a data crystal from her pocket. She explained that she had found this in the hibernation chamber on Kethro 7. It contained records from before the imprisonment. Records that could not have been faked because the technology was Draconari, not Velthari. Dr. Hannah Price took the crystal and fed it into the station systems. The records played for everyone to see. They showed the true history. They showed the Velthari rising to power through conquest and slavery. They showed the Draconari opposing them. They showed the peace talks where the dragons were poisoned. They showed everything. High Arbiter Zen studied the records carefully. He scanned them with senses beyond human understanding. Finally, he spoke. The records were authentic. The Draconari had told the truth. The Velthari had built their empire on suffering and lies. Thesix's face twisted with rage. He shouted that this was impossible. He shouted that the hegemony would not accept this verdict. He shouted that there would be consequences. The Arbiter silenced him with a gesture. He pronounced his judgment. The Draconari were innocent. Their imprisonment had been unjust. The Velthari hegemony was ordered to pay reparations and submit to investigation for historical crimes against sentient beings. Thesix stormed out of the chamber. His advisors followed. At the doorway, he turned and pointed at Lucy. He said she had made a powerful enemy today. He said the hegemony would not forget this humiliation. He said this was not over. Then he was gone. The gallery slowly emptied. Species approached Lucy and the dragons, offering congratulations and support. Many had suspected the truth about the Velthari for centuries, but had been too afraid to speak. Now the truth was in the open. Morthax found Lucy standing alone by a window, looking out at the stars. The Sovereign approached quietly for such a large creature. She said she had been wrong about humans. When Lucy first woke them, Morthax had assumed she was like all the others, weak, selfish, unworthy of trust. But Lucy had proven herself again and again. She had stood before the galaxy and demanded justice for creatures she barely knew. Lucy said she just did what was right. Anyone would have done the same. Morthax made a sound like distant thunder. It was a dragon laugh. She said that was exactly what made humans special. They believed anyone would do the right thing. They expected goodness as normal. In her long experience, Morthax had learned that goodness was rare. Courage was rare. What humans treated as ordinary was actually extraordinary. She placed her massive claw gently on Lucy's shoulder. She said the Draconari wished to honor Lucy in the highest way they knew. They wished to name her Dragon Friend. It was a title given only to those who had proven themselves worthy through action, not words. In 10,000 years, only a handful of beings had earned it. Lucy felt tears in her eyes. She accepted the honor. She said she would try to be worthy of it. Morthax said she already was in orbit above Harmony Point. Human ships and dragons flew together. They had arrived as strangers. They were leaving as allies. And somewhere in the darkness, Essex was planning his revenge. The tribunal was over. But the real test was still to come. 3 days had passed since the standoff began. The Valkyrie fleet had grown larger. More ships arrived every hour. Ambassador Crickstall sent messages demanding surrender. Admiral Patricia Grant ignored them all. Lucy Warren stood in the Dragon Cavern, surrounded by creatures who had become her friends. She had told them everything. She had explained the situation, the odds, the danger. The Dragonari had listened in silence. Now Sovereign Morthax, the eldest female and leader of their council, paced back and forth. Her silver scales caught the light as she moved. Her moonlight eyes were filled with anger and sorrow. She spoke in a voice like wind through ancient trees. She said the Valkyrie had not changed. 10,000 years of sleep, and they woke to find the same evil waiting for them. She said perhaps they should have stayed asleep. Perhaps they should have let time end them rather than bring war to these humans, who had shown them kindness. Lucy stepped forward. She told Morthax that was not true. She told her that humans chose to stand with them. Nobody forced them. They did it because it was right. Vectharion nodded his great head. He said the human female spoke truth. He said he had watched her people these past days. They were not fighting because they had to. They were fighting because they wanted to protect strangers. That was rare. That was precious. A younger dragon approached Lucy. Her name was Eurixith. She was barely past her first century, which made her almost a child by dragon standards. Her scales were deep blue like a midnight sky. She had been following Lucy everywhere for the past week. Rixith spoke in a soft voice. She said she was afraid. She had never seen war. She had been born just before the imprisonment. She had gone to sleep as a hatchling and woken as something in between. She did not know how to fight. Lucy took the young dragon's massive claw in her small hands. She looked up into those frightened blue eyes. She told Eurixith a story. She told her about Earth's history, about all the wars and struggles and dark times her people had faced. She told her about how humans had learned that fear was not something to eliminate. Fear was something to face together. When you stood alone, fear could crush you. When you stood with others, fear became just another obstacle to overcome. Rixith asked if Lucy was afraid now. Lucy smiled and said yes. She was terrified. Her hands were shaking. Her heart was racing. But she was not alone. She had the dragons. She had her fellow humans. And that made all the difference. The moment was interrupted by an alarm. Lucy's communicator screamed with warning signals. Ben Torres shouted through the speaker. The Valkyrie had launched an attack. They were not waiting for the deadline. Lucy ran toward the surface with Rixith close behind. The other dragons followed, their massive forms squeezing through tunnels that suddenly seemed too small. They burst onto the surface just as the sky turned to fire. The Valkyrie ships were everywhere. Beams of energy rained down on the human fleet. Admiral Grant's ships fought back, but they were outnumbered. Lucy watched as a human cruiser exploded in a ball of flame. Another ship lost its shields and began to fall toward the moon's surface. Captain Derek Shaw's voice crackled over the communicator. He was leading a fighter squadron against the enemy bombers. His voice was calm despite the chaos. He reported heavy losses. He reported that they could not hold much longer. He reported that it had been an honor serving with everyone. Lucy felt despair grip her heart. They were going to lose. The Valkyrie were too many. The humans were too few. Everything she had hoped for was going to end in fire and death. Then Morthax roared. The sound shook the ground. It echoed across the moon's surface and into space itself. It was a sound that had not been heard for 10,000 years. A sound that the galaxy had forgotten. The war cry of the Draconari. the dragons spread their wings. All 35 of them. They launched themselves into the sky with a force that cracked the ground beneath them. They flew upward through the thin atmosphere and into the void of space. Lucy watched in amazement. She had not known they could survive in space. She had not known they could fly without air. But the Draconari were not ordinary creatures. They were beings of fire and ancient power. Space was just another sky to them. Vectharion led the charge. He opened his mouth and breathed. What came out was not simple fire. It was plasma, pure and hot as a star's heart. The beam struck a Velthari cruiser and cut it in half. The ship exploded in a flash of light. The other dragons attacked. They wove between the human ships, protecting them with their bodies. They breathed destruction upon the enemy. They tore through metal hulls with claws that could rend starship armor. They were magnificent. They were terrifying. They were everything the Velthari had feared. Rixith flew alongside Captain Shaw's squadron. The young dragon matched speed with the human fighters. She watched how they moved, how they coordinated their attacks. Then she did something remarkable. She began to work with them. Shaw noticed immediately. He called out commands and Eurixith responded. When he turned left, she turned right, creating a crossfire that destroyed enemy fighters. When he pulled up, she dove down, catching ships that tried to escape. They moved together like they had trained for years. Lucy watched from the surface as the battle turned. The Velthari had expected to crush the humans easily. They had not expected 35 dragons to join the fight. Their formation broke. Their commanders panicked. Their ships began to retreat. Cricksdale's flagship tried to escape. Morthax and Vectharion caught it together. The Sovereign and the Elder flew side by side. They breathed fire in unison. The flagship melted like ice in summer. Ambassador Cricksdale's last transmission was a scream of disbelief. The remaining Velthari ships fled into hyperspace. The battle was over. The sky grew quiet. The dragons descended slowly, landing on the moon's surface around Lucy. They were wounded, some of them. Scales cracked. Wings torn. But they were alive. They were victorious. Rixith landed beside Lucy. The young dragon was trembling, but her eyes were bright. She said she had done it. She had fought. She had been afraid, but she had fought anyway. Lucy hugged the dragon's massive snout. She said she was proud. She said Rixith was the bravest dragon she knew. Admiral Grant's voice came through the communicator. She sounded exhausted but triumphant. She reported that the Velthari were gone. She reported that human casualties were heavy, but not as bad as expected. She reported that she had already sent word to Earth and to the Galactic Council. She said the whole galaxy had seen what happened today. Humans and dragons fighting side by side. Two species who had just met, standing together against tyranny. She said this was just the beginning. Dr. Lucy Warren walked through the dark tunnel with her scanner in hand. The light from her helmet cut through the blackness as she moved deeper underground. She had been working on Kethra 7 for 3 years now. The barren moon held valuable minerals that Earth needed, and Lucy was the best geologist on the station. Her job was simple. Find the minerals, map the tunnels, report back to Commander Ben Torres. But today, something was different. Her scanner showed thermal readings that made no sense. Deep beneath the surface, something was generating heat. Not the kind of heat that came from volcanic activity. This was something else. Something alive. Lucy stopped walking and checked her equipment again. The readings were the same. 35 distinct heat signatures, all clustered together in a massive cavern about 200 meters below her current position. She pressed her communicator and called the station. Ben Torres answered immediately. His voice crackled through the speaker. He asked what she had found. Lucy told him about the heat signatures. She said they looked biological. Large. Very large. Van was quiet for a moment. Then he told her to investigate but be careful. He would send Dr. Nathan Cole to meet her at the entrance. Lucy agreed and continued forward. The tunnel sloped downward, taking her deeper into the moon's crust. The air grew warmer. Her heart beat faster with each step. She had discovered many things in her career: ancient fossils, underground rivers, mineral deposits worth billions. But she had never felt anything like this. Something in her gut told her that whatever waited below would change everything. She found the entrance to the cavern 20 minutes later. It was massive. The opening stretched 50 meters wide and 30 meters tall. Lucy stood at the edge and pointed her light inside. What she saw made her breath catch in her throat. The cavern was enormous. It could have held a small city inside its walls, but that was not what made Lucy gasp. Arranged in neat rows across the cavern floor were 35 crystalline pods. Each pod was the size of a house. And inside each pod, she could see the outline of something huge. Something with wings folded against its body. Something with scales that reflected her light like dark mirrors. Dragons. They looked like dragons from the old Earth stories, but these were real. These were alive. Lucy walked slowly into the cavern. Her scanner beeped as it recorded everything. The pods were made of a material she did not recognize. Not crystal exactly. Something more advanced. Something that hummed with energy she could not identify. She approached the nearest pod and placed her hand against its surface. It was warm. Inside, she could see the creature more clearly now. It was at least 12 meters long from head to tail. Its scales were black like obsidian. Its claws were curved and sharp. Its eyes were closed in what looked like peaceful sleep. Lucy did not know how long she stood there. She was so focused on the creature that she did not notice when her scanner sent out a pulse of energy. She did not see the pod begin to glow brighter. She only realized something was happening when the ground began to shake. The crystalline surface cracked. Then it shattered. Lucy stumbled backward as the creature inside began to move. Its eyes opened. They were gold. Pure gold that seemed to glow with inner fire. The dragon rose to its full height, stretching wings that spanned 20 meters from tip to tip. It turned its massive head and looked directly at Lucy. Behind her, more pods began to crack. More creatures began to wake. Lucy heard the tunnel behind her collapse with a thunderous roar. Rocks fell and blocked her only exit. She was trapped in a cavern with 35 awakening dragons. The first dragon stepped toward her. Each footstep shook the ground. Lucy knew she should be terrified. She knew she should run, even though there was nowhere to go. But something held her in place. Something about the way the creature looked at her. There was intelligence in those golden eyes. Curiosity. Not hunger, not anger. Just ancient, patient curiosity. The dragon stopped 3 meters away from Lucy. It lowered its head until its eye was level with her face. Lucy could feel its breath, hot like a furnace but not burning. She could smell something like smoke and old stone. She could hear its heartbeat, slow and powerful like distant thunder. The dragon spoke. Its voice was deep and resonant. It seemed to come from everywhere at once. Lucy's communicator crackled and translated the words into English. "Why do you not run, small one?" The others always ran. Lucy thought about the question. She looked at the massive creature before her. She looked at the other dragons now rising from their pods, stretching wings and shaking off 10,000 years of sleep. She thought about her collapsed tunnel and her useless weapons and her racing heart. Then she answered, "Running seems pointless. And besides, I woke you up. The polite thing is to at least say hello." The dragon stared at her for a long moment. Lucy wondered if she had made a terrible mistake. She wondered if these would be her last words. Then the dragon laughed. It was a sound like rolling thunder mixed with genuine amusement. The other dragons turned to look. They seemed surprised. Perhaps their leader did not laugh often. The dragon introduced himself. He said his name was Vectharian. He was the eldest of this clutch. He had been sleeping for 10,000 years. And in all that time, across all the species he had encountered, before his imprisonment, he had never met anyone quite like her. Lucy introduced herself in return. She told him her name and that she was a geologist from Earth. She told him she was sorry for waking him. Without permission, Vectharian said she did not need to apologize. He said they had slept long enough. He asked about her people. He asked if all humans were as strangely brave as she was. Lucy smiled despite her fear. She said humans were complicated. Some were brave. Some were cowards. Most were somewhere in between. But they tried their best. The other dragons gather around now. They were all different colors. Some red like burning coals. Some blue like deep ocean. Some green like ancient forests. But they all watched Lucy with the same curious expression. This tiny creature who did not run. This small being who introduced herself to monsters thought an older female dragon approached. She was silver with eyes like moonlight. She asked Vectharian if this human could be trusted. Vectharian looked at Lucy again. He studied her face for a long time. Then he answered. He said he did not know yet. But he said she had done something no other species had done in all their long history. She had treated them with respect before she knew if they deserved it. She had spoken to them as equals before she knew their strength. That was either very foolish or very wise. Either way, it was interesting enough to keep her alive long enough to find out. Lucy let out a breath. She did not know she was holding. She was still trapped. She was still surrounded by creatures who could kill her with a single breath. But somehow, she knew the worst was over. Somehow, she knew that her simple act of courtesy had bought her something precious, time, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something the galaxy had never seen before. 1 week had passed since Lucy Warren woke the dragons. News of the discovery had spread across the galaxy like wildfire. Every news channel carried the story. Every government held emergency meetings. And every species with starships was now racing toward KETH Ross-7. Lucy had spent the week inside the cavern. The rescue teams had cleared the collapsed tunnel on the second day, but she had chosen to stay. Commander Ben Torres thought she was crazy. Dr. Nathan Cole thought she was brave. The dragons thought she was fascinating. She had learned so much in 7 days. The Draconari, as they called themselves, were not simple beasts. They had civilization. They had art and music and philosophy. They had laws and customs and a complex system of honor. They had been the protectors of the galaxy once, long ago, before someone had put them to sleep. Vectharian told her the story one evening as they sat together in the cavern. His voice was sad as he spoke of the old days. The Draconari had guarded the young species of the galaxy. They had protected the weak from the strong. They had destroyed slavers and tyrants wherever they found them. They had been loved by many and feared by those who deserved to be feared. But then the Velthari came. They were a coalition of powerful species who grew rich through conquest and trade in living beings. The Draconari opposed them. War followed. The war lasted 100 years. Many dragons died. Many Velthari died. In the end, the Velthari used treachery to win. They poisoned the dragons during peace talks and sealed them in hibernation chambers, scattered across the galaxy. Lucy listened to the story with growing anger. She asked if the Velthari were still powerful. Vectharian said he did not know. 10,000 years was a long time. Empires rose and fell. But he suspected the Velthari survived. Creatures like them always survived. His suspicion proved correct the very next day. Lucy was teaching some of the younger dragons about Earth when her communicator buzzed. Ben Torres sounded worried. He told her to come to the command center immediately. Something was happening in orbit. Lucy ran through the tunnels and emerged on the surface. The mining station was buzzing with activity. Workers pointed at the sky. Lucy looked up and felt her heart sink. Ships. Hundreds of ships. They filled the sky like angry insects. And they were not human ships. She reached the command center and found Ben standing beside a tall woman in a military uniform. The woman introduced herself as Admiral Patricia Grant of the United Earth Fleet. She had arrived that morning with a defensive force. But the ships in the sky were not hers. A screen on the wall showed a face that made Lucy uncomfortable. It was gray and angular, with too many eyes and a mouth full of needle teeth. The creature identified itself as Ambassador Crystal of the Velthary Hegemony. It demanded to speak with whoever was in charge. Admiral Grant stepped forward. She identified herself and asked what the hegemony wanted. Crystal's many eyes blinked in sequence. He said the hegemony had come to correct an ancient mistake. The creatures sleeping beneath the moon were dangerous criminals. They had been sentenced to eternal imprisonment 10,000 years ago. The humans had interfered with that sentence by waking them. The hegemony demanded that the dragons be handed over for immediate execution. Lucy felt rage building in her chest. She stepped forward before anyone could stop her. She told the ambassador that she was the one who woke the dragons. She told him they were not criminals. She told him the Draconari had shared their history with her. She knew what the Velthary had really done. Crystal's eyes narrowed. He asked who this human female was to question the justice of the hegemony. Lucy said she was just a geologist. But she knew the difference between justice and murder. The ambassador made a sound like grinding stones. It might have been a laugh. He said the opinion of a primitive species did not matter. The hegemony had ruled this region of space for 10,000 years. Humans were newcomers. They would hand over the dragons or face the consequences. Admiral Grant looked at Lucy. She looked at the ships, filling the sky. She looked at the reports on her screen, showing that the Velthary fleet outnumbered her forces 3-1. She was a military officer. She understood tactics and odds and the price of war. But she was also human. And humans did not abandon the innocent to satisfy bullies. Admiral Grant told Crystal that Earth needed time to consider his demands. She asked for 3 days. The ambassador agreed, but warned that his patience was limited. The screen went dark. Ben Torres looked at the admiral with fear in his eyes. He asked what they were going to do. They could not fight the entire hegemony. Admiral Grant turned to Lucy. She asked if the dragons were really innocent. Lucy said yes without hesitation. She said they were protectors, not monsters. The Velthary had imprisoned them because they could not be controlled. Because they stood up for the weak. The admiral nodded slowly. She said that sounded familiar. She said it sounded like something humans would do. Dr. Nathan Cole, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. He was a xenobiologist. He had studied the dragons all week. He confirmed everything Lucy said. The Draconari were intelligent, honorable, and genuinely good. The galaxy had lost something precious when they were imprisoned. Admiral Grant made her decision. She contacted her fleet and ordered them to take defensive positions around the moon. Then she opened a channel to Earth Command. She reported that she had assessed the situation on Kethros 7. She reported that the Draconari were not a threat. She reported that the Velthary hegemony was attempting to commit genocide against a peaceful species. And she reported that she intended to prevent that genocide with or without official approval. Earth Command was silent for a long moment. Then a voice came through. It belonged to Senator Marcus Webb. He asked the admiral if she understood what she was risking. War with the hegemony could cost millions of lives. Admiral Grant said she understood. She said some things were worth fighting for. Lucy felt tears in her eyes. She had not expected this. She had not expected humans she barely knew to risk everything for creatures they had just met. But that was humanity. That was what made her species special. They did not calculate the cost of doing right. They just did it. The Admiral turned to Lucy. She said the dragons needed to know what was happening. She said they needed to prepare. Lucy nodded and headed back toward the tunnels. Behind her, Admiral Grant was already giving orders. The human fleet was moving into position. The Valkyrie were watching. The standoff had begun.